We are recording this podcast on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We wish to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may be listening.
Hi everybody, I'm Priscilla.
And I'm Elise.
Welcome to Novel Feelings, where two psychologists take a deep dive into your favorite books. Today we have an interview with Allayne Webster.
Exactly. If you haven't heard of Allayne before, Allayne is an internationally published children's and young adult author who lives in South Australia. She's a multiple arts grant recipient and a South Australian Premier's Reading Challenge ambassador. She served on literary boards and her novels have been listed for various awards. So most recently, her novel Sensitive was shortlisted in the 2020 Australian Speech Pathology Awards and was a 2023 Outstanding Book for Young People with Disabilities, awarded by IBBY, International Board on Books for Young People. And today we are talking about Allayne Webster's new book called Selfie.
Here's a bit about Selfie. Tully can't believe her luck. Dene is famous. Everyone loves her. She has thousands of followers online and hundreds of sponsorship deals. Being best friends with Dene Walker is a dream come true. Tully is soon hardly aware that her longtime bestie Kira exists, as she shapes her own interests and cares to be the person worthy of Dene's attention. And she's not prepared for the heartache and confusion when Dene's friendship is not all she imagined it to be. Selfie is an engaging and very real exploration of social media and the trickiness of separating what's real from the glossiness of the online world. It's a tender story about friendship and staying true to yourself. Thank you, Text Publishing, for linking us with Allayne.
Before we get started on our review, just our usual disclaimers. So we are trained psychologists, but this podcast should not be taken as direct therapeutic advice. Please consult a professional for more specific and tailored advice. The first half of this interview is spoiler-free, but the second half does contain minor spoilers for Selfie as we dig into the mental health content and what happens in the second half of the book. And we'll just flag that this interview has been slightly edited for length.
Today we are talking about topics such as social media's impact on young people and unhealthy friendships.
All right, let's get started.
Well, Allayne, congratulations on your huge body of work so far. As we talked about before the recording started, this is your 10th book. That's super impressive. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. How does publishing Selfie compare to, say, your very first book?
Sure. Well, so much has changed, I guess, on the publishing landscape since I first came in the door back in 2007 was when I published my first YA novel, Our Little Secret, which was through Scholastic or Omnibus, the then imprint of Scholastic. You know, I've seen some fairly large changes in the last, 15, 16 years or something now. Yeah. And obviously one of those has been the advent of social media, in terms of us being able to share and promote our work, because, you know, very originally I was presenting in front of live audiences and, you know, it was in traditional media, like in the newspaper. And Our Little Secret was, in fact, the first ever YA novel recorded in South Australian Hansard in Parliament.
Amazing.
so weird. So a lot has changed over the years for sure.
Yeah, and what about your writing process? Has that changed at all over that time?
I think it has. I think that very originally I was a bit of a pantser and I just would go very much with the voice in my heart and just see where it led me, which wasn't always the most time effective means of writing a book. I've written them in both ways, with a plan and without one. And they still produce the same thing, which is what, you know, I go in and tell kids, you know, don't worry too much if you do it one way and someone's doing it another. But for me, I definitely progressed more so to at least having in my mind a firm outline and plan. And that might just be even just as much as a few lines about a chapter and what's going to happen in that chapter. And that's as much as it takes. But I still find myself planting things at the beginning of the story, not knowing where or how they're going to tie together, but somehow I trust the process. And at the other end, I think, oh gosh, I planted that thing back in chapter 1, and all of a sudden I'm using it. So
your intuition must be working well then.
must be, yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose if everything is planned out, some of the excitement goes out of the process as well.
Oh, definitely. I think absolutely. I don't want to ever plan something, right down to the finite details, because you're right. It does. It sucks the joy from it. And I I guess, I'd probably even struggle with breaking my own rules. So I don't want to write rules for myself because I feel like I'm failing myself in some ways.
And your books have, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that you've written in the children's, middle-age and young adult space
Yes.
for most of your career. Yeah. What draws you towards writing for children and teenagers?
I really feel that for me personally, when I sit down to write, that's the voice that comes out. I think that my memories of being from the age of about probably 11 onwards are really, really strong. And I just naturally gravitate to that age range and fit there. And I just, obviously too, the joy of sharing stories with teenagers and then responding to them just floats my boat. So, I absolutely love going into schools and talking to kids and, and just seeing their eyes light up when the penny drops and they get something. And yeah, I wouldn't trade that for all the chocolate at Hague's, which is a big statement coming from me. Yeah.
Is that something you get to do often, to go into schools and talk to young readers?
Definitely. Well, it is now that COVID's finally kind of, the cloud is clearing. Yeah. So in fact, it was devastating during COVID not to be able to do that. And I think I did do some online Zoom sessions, but it really was awful to lose that connection. So yes, definitely. In fact, I've got a 2-week residency that's funded by the Australian Arts Council and Writers SA, and I'll be going into a college here in Adelaide for 2 weeks to work with high school students and every year level, is my understanding, from year 7 through to year 12, to present workshops and hopefully help them to hone their writing skills. So I couldn't be more excited about that, because those interactions, for me also plant seeds of, maybe something that I'm going to write next. So it's a fantastic opportunity. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, sounds like it would be so rewarding. I'm jealous. So we wanted to start asking you some questions about your new book, Selfie. So first of all, we, of course, have an influencer character, Dene Walker, who's quite critical to the story. And Dene has technically been famous since before she was even born. We'd love to hear a little bit more about Dene. So can you tell us about how you conceptualise her and the impact of fame on her personality?
Sure. So Dene, I guess, she's a mishmash of everything I've ever seen and witnessed, on Instagram or online, on Facebook, whatever be the platform. So, I think this stuff kind of just enters your bloodstream somehow, and I regurgitate in some ways what I'm seeing. So it wasn't honestly a far stretch to imagine, what that would be like. And I think too, we as authors actually just get a taste of it, because we are essentially public figures. Not that any of us are kind of reaching Taylor Swift. As we're not reaching those levels quite, but we are in the public sphere and we are posting online ourselves. And oh my gosh, there is so much that goes through my head when I'm doing that. And so in some ways, writing this was probably quite cathartic, because I was working through all of those issues and misgivings and or joys or whatever through this book.
As you mentioned before, the emergence of social media has meant that you might have to produce content or learn to put up a bit of a persona, I suppose, online, even if it's not to the extent of someone like Kim Kardashian, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
And I suppose I find that really interesting about Dene, in that we get glimpses of the face that she puts on social media versus what's actually happening for her. And I found that really interesting to read.
Absolutely, because I think, you know, it depends on the consumer. Everyone's different. So people consuming what they see on social media, some will take it at face value and just assume what's being presented to them is the end game. And I tend to think a lot more deeply about it. And I guess those questions go through my head. Is this genuine? Is this performative? You know, is this person feeling this way today, but will they feel completely differently tomorrow and take that down, you know, like, and I see some pretty big sharing, you know, and there are people that confess to being oversharers, which is fine, you know, if you're happy and you're comfortable with that. But you know, you witness a lot of it, and I think my heart, I suppose I'm, you know, a generally empathetic person, so I worry for people at the end of the day. I worry underneath it all, are they okay? Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess one thing that struck me about Dene was, you know, without spoiling things, as we'll dive into spoilers a little bit more later on, but we get a glimpse of perhaps her having some difficulties maintaining or even forming friendships with other girls her age, you know, the not necessarily offline girls, but the girls who are definitely not massive Instagram influencers.
Yes.
Can you talk about Dene's experience with friendships?
Yeah, absolutely. So because she's been this online consumable product since she was born, she struggles to have trust and faith in the friendships that she develops, because she doesn't know, are these people befriending me because I am famous, or are they genuine in liking me? So, and I think, you know, that's something that would extend to any actor in Hollywood who would suddenly find themselves, you know, the hot new thing, and then suddenly be surrounded by hangers on and people who want something from them. So, and this goes on in our society, right, left and centre. You know, people have a smidge of fame, and people that didn't take any notice previously suddenly sit up and want to be connected. So I don't think it's unreasonable at all for Dene to be deeply confused about whether her friendships are in fact genuine or not.
Mm. Mm. And, of course, we have Tully as well, who is our protagonist of the story. And Tully has a bit of a parasocial relationship with Dene before the story progresses. You know, for those who might not be aware, a parasocial relationship occurs when one person has a perceived friendship or closeness with somebody who they don't actually know in real life or know in a close capacity online. So their relationship was interesting because it's quite an unequal relationship when they first get together. So can you comment on, I guess, Tully's experience of that relationship at those early stages too?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a power imbalance. It's an interesting dynamic from the get-go, because Tully has been a long-term fan of Dene and idolises her in many ways, and as you say, has only had that connection with her online, so perceives herself to know her. And she's equally stunned when Dene selects her to be her best friend at a new school. So, and that happens very instantly. So Tully, rather, her head is spinning because this famous person has befriended her, and it's all her dreams come true at once, you know. So yeah, so Tully, you know, is already has these formed ideas of who Dene should be, and you know, that's difficult if you're going to begin a new friendship.
We'll definitely be chatting more about that dynamic later in the spoilery version of this episode.
Sure.
Why did you choose to focus on Instagram in this novel rather than other popular social media apps such as TikTok, for example?
I think TikTok rates are mentioned somewhere in the book, but I think because when I first conceived the idea, I think because I was talking about Dene being followed since she was in the womb, that made more sense to me that Mum would have been using Instagram rather than TikTok, and that she's built her following on there, and that's just followed on because, of course, she's got sponsorship deals and all that kind of stuff. So Instagram just seems like the natural home for this story. And outside of that, it's actually, as an author, for me, it's my favourite platform. Like, I obviously use Facebook and Twitter. I don't use TikTok, but I really enjoy Instagram. I love that space. So for me, it was a happy place to write about.
No, it's good to hear when somebody has a positive experience of social media apps in some capacity, because we hear a lot about the other side of things as well.
Yeah.
Taking all of this in mind, what messages would you like teenage readers to take away from the book?
I've tried very hard with this novel to not be virtue signalling and to not be necessarily providing answers to what is a really difficult thing to navigate. Social media is difficult, not just for teenagers, but for adults. So, and I certainly don't feel like I have all the answers. Learn little tricks along the way. But what I guess at the core of it, what I would like for teenagers to take away is that genuine friendships, those that are based on truly knowing each other and honesty and care, are the things to be valued in this life. And outside of that, none of us are the sum of the posts that we put online. There is so much about ourselves that we don't share with the whole wide world. For me personally, my friendships, those that I treasure and that are really, really strong, are those that I'm wholeheartedly invested in, and they get to see the best and the worst of me. But I feel like, on social media, a lot of the time we only show one side rather than another. So, I really want for kids to think hard, I guess, get them thinking about these platforms and what people are doing on there, and maybe stop to consider that it's worthwhile standing back from something and not taking it on surface value and considering what might else be going on.
Yeah, wonderful. Hopefully the book will reach the teenage readers who need to pick up on those messages and work out.
No doubt that it will.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Shall we move on to the spoiler questions?
Yeah,
Let's do it. So if you haven't read Selfie, now is the time to tune out, but absolutely go and pick up a copy and come back and listen once you have read the book.
Hi, this is Leah Stuhler, creator and host of YA Book Chat podcast. If you love reading young adult books and chatting about them with your friends, then head on over to my podcast and take a listen. Each episode, my guest and I chat about a different YA book. We start spoiler-free and then head into our spoiler section where we dive into the mysteries of each book. And we do it with laughs and fun along the way. You can listen to YA Book Chat on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and wherever you get your podcast. And now, back to the show.
This is always my favourite part of interviews because we get to ask all the questions that we mull over as we're going through the books as well and can't always find the answers to in existing interviews and so on. So this is always exciting. All right, so our first spoiler question for today is about Tully and Dene once again. So a little bit of a deeper dive into their relationship. So in the book, they have quite an intense friendship. So Tully gets swept up in Dene's charms and Dene declares them and another girl sisters fairly quickly. When Madeline comes into the picture, though, things turn quite sour. So could you comment on this dynamic? So, for example, was Dene deliberate in pitting Tully against Madeline?
Yeah, I mean, yes, to some degree, because it was her means of communicating that she's not happy about something. So, but she's also has a slightly cold edge to her as well, which I think is a coping mechanism for what she has to deal with and endure, so she can freeze people out, if you like, or be cold in order to just cope and to get her message across.
Yeah, maybe a bit of deliberateness to it, but
yes,
not maybe an active choice of something that she decided to do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Interesting.
And we noticed that Tully had an interesting obsessive streak to her personality when it comes to her friendship with Dene. Like, she was all in that friendship, and then later she was also all in her interests in art. What inspired Tully's personality for you?
Yeah, so Tully leads more with her heart than she does with her head, and she's very... I wouldn't say she's desperate to be liked, nothing like that, but she's very committed to caring and to the friendship. And she's, again, it's coping mechanism that there's other things in her life that are difficult to deal with within her own family. And so it's comforting for her to look outside of that situation and to focus her energy elsewhere. So when that sort of goes belly up with focusing all that love and devotion to Dene, she then turns it in on herself and concentrates really hard on the art and tries to channel her energy there as well. But both of them are a coping mechanism for what's really going on in the background.
Yeah, I definitely got the impression that Tully was a big feeler of feelings, a person who, like a lot of teenagers, like myself as a teenager as well, feels things very intensely and needs to perhaps channel those feelings into something. And at least I suppose with art that was a healthier way of directing those feelings than it was with her friendship with Dene. But yeah, it was interesting the moment where I think it was her stepmother who commented on, maybe you're taking this a bit too far now as well. I don't know if you had any thoughts around that.
Yeah. So the stepmom, Michelle, throughout this book is quite influential in getting Tully to stop and consider her actions and what she's doing. And I wanted to portray a parent who wasn't intrusive but was just trying to guide their teenager in the right direction. So, so Michelle is very aware that this is going on. So, again, Tully's really just trying to deal, I think, with some feelings that overwhelm her, and she's just trying to focus on the thing in front of her as best she can to get through.
I know this isn't, this was probably never your intention. It wasn't the genre that we're in, but there was a point when she was, all in that friendship that it crossed my mind that this could have been a very different story, like a middle grade, not you, but that sort of obsessive storyline. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But yes, glad we didn't go there because I don't think it would have been the right audience.
It might have been a bit of an odd fit for the genre to do that, but I could see a similar storyline happening in maybe a novel aimed at older audiences where it does go more explicitly down the stalker pathway or something like that. Yeah, I'm glad it didn't.
No, definitely not a middle grade stalker. But yes, you're absolutely right, and it actually does have elements of that in there for sure.
And I can see why Dene became very wary of Tully's actions as the story went on, when their friendship was unfortunately crumbling, to why Dene would assume the worst. And that must have been a scary experience for Dene as well, having had previous experiences with other fans or friendships just taking things a bit too far as well, something that perhaps the average teenager doesn't have to deal with. But it just added an interesting layer of dimensionality to her personality, I thought.
Absolutely. I mean, we as human beings are we bring a whole pile of backstory to the table And I guess that's what I was trying to do there with Dene, was to demonstrate that, this is not just a reaction in the moment. This is the result of having experienced something very similar before. But the question needs to be asked, is it the same beast this time around, or is it a different one? And I think, we as humans tend to react on our past experiences and have very strong reactions sometimes because, that particular thing was very negative and hard to go through. And so we jump the gun a bit, and we need to allow a little bit of space to consider, actually maybe this looks the same, but it's not the same. It's not the same beast. So I think Dene needed some time in the story to kind of figure that out. Because, she's already suffered some kind of, trauma or damage from what she's had to deal with already.
Yeah, I could see why her sense of safety might be impacted there, for sure.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is another aspect of this book. Not that not that I go into it in any great depth, but we are posting online, or Dene is in this story, her life. She's accessible to complete strangers, and that leaves us, when we do that, when we make those selections to have our stuff out there for anyone to be able to see, we're actually in some ways creating a security or a potential security issue that people could find you. And, the stuff, they talk about doxing and, our cyber security in terms of us losing our identity and all sorts of things. So it's never just, straightforward that we're putting up happy snaps. There can be repercussions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose an added layer here is that she is underage, which makes her even more vulnerable online than a typical adult. Yeah, and in the story, obviously, Mum has a lot of influence in the background there too.
I guess speaking of those family relationships and parents, in Selfie there are some interesting themes around complex family dynamics. So I guess Tully's relationship with her distant mother was quite interesting, including her response to her mother's illness, and it seems to be, I suppose, suppressing what was actually happening for her.
Yes.
How would you describe their relationship and Tully's feelings towards her mother?
Tully obviously feels abandoned largely by both of her parents, even though she speaks relatively highly of her dad and that he's got a job and it's an important job and he's got to do X, Y, Z. She's very tolerant of that. And with her mother, she just can't even face it at all. And so her mum equally can't face the fact that she's dealing with a really severe illness, and so the combination of the both of them sticking their heads in the sand isn't getting anyone anywhere. So I guess what I really wanted to do though with this book is to portray the stepmother character in a positive manner, in that I don't, we sort of got that children's narrative of the evil stepmother. And, I had step parents and they were both really magical people and good to me. And I think it's important that we actually portray those caregivers in a good light. So that's what I aim to do with Michelle in this story.
I know I really, appreciated Michelle's the responsibilities that she took as a parent without overstepping her place. I thought was handled quite nicely. So it was nice, even though Tully was feeling perhaps abandoned by her mother and to a degree to her father as well, that she still did have a parent in her life that was taking responsibility and clearly was showing that love and that kindness for her and her brother,
yes.
which is really important for that sense of stability at home.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Michelle holds the whole thing together and she does it with her own issues going on with illness herself, and but somehow she manages it. And I think, she's a really strong female character in this book.
Yeah, absolutely. She comes across as very, I don't know if mature is the right word, but she handles her own relationship with Tully's dad very well. And how she portrays that relationship to the children seems to be a very well-adjusted response, I think, to the whole situation.
Yeah.
And I think we needed some modelling of healthy relationships in this book as well.
Oh, absolutely, yes. We sure did. Yeah.
And this is a question that we ask all of our interviewees. Do you have any authors or books that you would like to recommend to our listeners?
Well, obviously, if you haven't already, then everything that Vicky Wakefield ever wrote. She's my darling friend and the beautiful human being who got to read the first draft of Selfie and of much of my other work. And I just think her writing is just exceptional. And so absolutely. And she's another text author. I mean, oh my gosh, I've just read so much Australian YA of late that I've just loved, Alice Boyle's Dancing Barefoot. Again, I mean, I sound like I'm plugging text authors and it's not intentional. It's just that I happen to have read these books and love them. So Alice Boyle's Dancing Barefoot was brilliant. Miranda Luby's Sadie Starr's Guide to Starting Over, I really enjoyed. But if we go a little bit older school, I've always loved the work of Robert Newton. And, there are some authors that have just written the one book that I just adore and hold dear. So I loved Allayne L's Stone Girl, Dammit Devereaux's Living on Hope Street. I guess anything that's got that sort of edge and portrays, I guess, people from different economic backgrounds, or the harder lived stories, if you like, are the ones that really, really speak to me. So, and outside of that too, Erin Goff, Amelia Westlake is one of my all-time favourites.
Definitely a classic. Yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah, the wit, the humour that's laid into that book to me is magical and something I look up to. But in fact, I mean, not that you can see it because we're obviously recording, but you guys might see, I've got all these books, these bookshelves next to my work desk, and they're filled with Love Oz YA, and I love looking at the names. I get excited, when I go into schools and I see my friends' books sitting on the shelf, Nova Wheatman, Pete Harry, Clay Zane was another one I loved, Holden Shepherd. Oh my gosh, we are so unbelievably spoiled for choice in Australia, and we have one of the strongest, cohorts of writers I think, the industry has ever had. And, yeah, I'm just constantly in awe, to be honest, of all of my peers.
It sounds like such a supportive community as well.
Yeah. Oh, and, 1,000%. Everyone's really beautiful and will reach out to you. And, that certainly happened, to me when I was actually really sick going back 6 years ago and almost died. And not so long ago I was cleaning out my office and I came across these cards and letters that the Squibby people had written, and people from interstate, the whole community had written me these beautiful notes. And so, yeah, this community goes above and beyond sometimes. And, yeah, I do feel like I'm embraced in a nice warm hug and a hat, so therefore happy to give one back. Yeah.
Yes, your bookshelves are #goals.
Yeah, I mean, you can only see one here, but I've got another whole lounge room library out there.
Oh, wonderful. That's awesome.
It's the thing I gravitate to. If I visit anyone's house, it's the first thing I sort of wander towards and want to look at. So,
yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
All right, Allayne. Well, I think that was our final question for the interview. So thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure to speak with you and to learn more about the book, the writing process, and to get all of your amazing recommendations too.
Thank you.
Now we will quickly mention what is going up on the blog post on our website to link in with this episode.
So on our website, we'll link to some resources about social media and how to support young people who might be having some trouble with social media for various reasons. We'll also link Allayne's social media and where to find her and her books online, as well as some information about the books that she recommended. We might just have to link to the Love Oz YA collection because she's sure to give a lot of recommendations. All wonderful books, of course. It'll be a very long list if we do include every single one. So, yeah, we'll link something together.
Yep, absolutely. And that wraps us up for today. Please remember to subscribe and follow us to keep up to date with us and to know when our new episodes are posted.
Our website is novelfeelings.com, and please remember to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
If you would like to ask us a question or chat to us, you can send a message to us via our website or follow us on social media. At the moment, we are on Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads at novel_feelings. I feel like my bookstagram is not even worth mentioning at this point. But, you know, it's still out there. You can find it at paved with books with an extra S. It will come back to life.
Just confidently say it. Just say, follow me on social media. Follow my Instagram. It's great. I do love your update, though, whenever we go through. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for listening. And thanks once again to Allayne for joining us for this interview. Take care, everyone. Bye.
See ya.